Good evening. I'm Erica Lukes, and this is Expanding Frontiers Research. And I had a fantastic week. I want to say it was very sad to walk into the archive and not see Jan Aldrich there. He was on my show last week and is an historian and an archivist who has also been a bit of a mentor to me over the years. We had great times. We had a couple intense moments, as you can imagine, spending 10 days around somebody 10 hours a day. But I had a delightful time, and I look forward to working with him in the future. I hope he has had a safe trip to his next destination. I also want to just take a moment to tell you about Expanding Frontiers Research. For those of you who don't know about our nonprofit, I started the nonprofit with Jack Brewer and Barry Greenwood, and you can find us at expandingfrontiersresearch.org. You can pledge your support to our organization. We are definitely in the beginning stages. We've done incredible work that has turned heads. We're continuing to do that with Jack's excellent work using FOIA to find out information, and we'll talk about that with Jack this evening. But for a moment, I want to just show you a friend of mine. His name is Dick Norris, and he passed away at the age of 83. He was a well-known journalist and anchorman here in Utah, and he was well-known all over the country. He was absolutely exceptional, and he started his journalism career back in the 60s. I first got in touch, well, actually, Dick got in touch with me a few years back when he and his family had found me and my work. He sent me a message on Facebook, and I literally about doubled over with excitement because he's such an icon, and he was so good at what he did. But he wanted to talk about UFOs. He wanted to talk about experiences that he'd had in his life. And so we started a friendship, and we had great plans to hire a film crew and go around Utah and document different things and investigate and talk with people and get their stories about things. And unfortunately, because of his health and COVID, we didn't have the opportunity to do that. But I want to definitely say that my heart goes out to his family. And I want to thank Dick for being just a great friend and a great person. It was really a bright spot in my life, so I appreciate that. I also wanted to show really quickly my Mufasa, who obviously had to get in the middle of everything when Jan was here. He's pretty good that way. And then also my favorite photo op with Jan. I found these incredible flyers for different shows or different conferences, and you can look and see how clearly excited he is about holding that. He was having a good time with that, and so it was really fun. But I want to bring in my guest this evening, Jack Brewer, who's been on the show multiple times and is also my partner at Expanding Frontiers Research. You can find him at the UFO Trail blog spot. And if you go back, that's a really important blog to read because he's done such in-depth research over the years, investigating claims in ufology and the people involved in promoting false narratives. He's also the author of 2 books, and we will talk a little bit about that towards the end of the show. And so, Jack, welcome to the show this evening.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Erica. And I'm sorry to hear about Mr. Norris. I'm sorry to hear about that.
You know, I feel very grateful though that I got to know him. And so it was a delight. And it's been very funny because over the past couple of weeks, I've just had this feeling I need to call him. I wonder what's going on with him. And then I learned of his passing. And so, that
Yeah.
I'm glad that I knew him for the brief time I did. But I want to talk a little bit about, because you know that this is a subject that is something that you and I have both put a lot of research efforts into, and we've studied for a long, long time. And before we do that, I want to say hello, Peter. I want to say, hey, Steve and Lord Ludacris and Rodan and all of the wonderful people in chat, J Bench, Simon Fly, Spooky. Thank you so much for being here every week and supporting the show. And it's fun to have you in here. And I want to just give a little shout out to Wildfire Time, who clearly, well, I'm not quite sure. Maybe he needs to go back and play in the little kitty box, the little sandbox for a minute. and then come up with something more effective. But nice try. So anyway, on that note, I want to. And it's like, I'm not sure, like, are we 5? Are we 10? Like, where are we coming from there? But clearly it's entertaining for somebody. So I want to talk a little bit about the latest episode of Skinwalker Ranch and the Blingin' Bishop, who is Mr. Sean Reyes, the Attorney General, who appeared, and this is from KSL.com, Utah's Attorney General hunts the paranormal on Skinwalker Ranch. And here he is in his cowboy hat. Clearly the stylist for the show maybe could have found a different hat for him, a little bit smaller. But, Bat Boy and the Blingin' Bishop look really good together. This is great. And I also want to just talk a little bit about some of the comments that he made. When asked, and this is from KSL again, when asked how the Attorney General became involved with the series, a spokesman for Reyes said he was invited to the show because the ranch is a site of national interest. And he's not appearing in the show in his official capacity. Spokesman Rich Pyatt said, no taxpayer funds are used for his appearances on the show. And I loved how they threw that out there. I'm sure that was a little shot over the bow towards us, but we can still do some digging. That'll be fun. And then it goes on to say a clip of the show on the show's YouTube channel lists the headline Attorney General assists in major UFO investigation. And then we go on. Oops, and we can't see that one. But and then this is what he says. This is very powerful. Or not. Gentlemen, what the heck is flying around in my state? He asked cast members when they showed the video footage that captured a small identified object. In a later interview on the episode, Reyes said he could confirm that a Black Hawk helicopter had flown over the ranch after taking off from Heber City, but he didn't provide any further information. Okay, but he also did talk about how this could be a threat to the sovereign rights of citizens and flying that flag that we've heard all over the country in certain circles. My question for the Attorney General, the Blingin' Bishop, is why are you so concerned about sovereign rights and a Black Hawk helicopter, which, by the way, back in 2022, they actually deemed a specific version of a Black Hawk helicopter available for commercial use. You can actually buy a certain type of Black Hawk helicopter. So, I'm just saying that I'm sure that was staged, and I'm sure that there was actually nothing of merit, but I guess the burden of proof is on the people putting that forward. But, you're not worried. The Attorney General clearly isn't worried about safety implications. He isn't worried about the dangerous levels of ionizing radiation or the hitchhiker effect that clearly follows people home and kills them. He's definitely not worried about indigenous peoples and the potential we've heard from many people over the years talking about these sacred sites on the ranch. And so I don't know, maybe the Attorney General's got his priorities wrong when he's visiting Comic-Con. And if he actually has the gall to say that he isn't doing this as the Attorney General, I'd say, well, guess what? Every appearance you make, including on Skinwalker Ranch, Attorney General's used. So I don't know. We've clearly got a problem here in Utah. And it's not about promoting the truth. It's about promoting people that you work with in a business sense, I'm sure. And So anyway, another question I want to throw out here before I actually let Jack talk is the question of the origin story of the Skinwalker myth. So we know that the Hunt for the Skinwalker put the myth forward that this was a Navajo curse on this ridge. But we haven't heard anybody really back that up. And the simple fact of the matter is there were no Navajo or Dene in that area. This is Ute. This is a Ute reservation right next to the ranch. So if somebody out there listening could do me a favor and do a little homework, find out where that story came from, then please let me know. But at this point, again, it's just simply out of place and no factual information has come to light. It's just people spinning more and more narratives about a place that is clearly a money-making venture for all involved. So thank you, Jack. How are you?
I am well, thank you. The first thing that jumped out at me about the Attorney General having a spokesperson talk with KSL was that interested me because I'm aware that a number of journalists have reached out to his office and they have not been willing to discuss his comments about Skinwalker Ranch and his appearance on the show. So I would be interested how what chain of events led to a spokesperson deciding they wanted to give statements to KSL and how that went about. And I'm sure we could find precedents that it's really shaky when a public official wants to say, well, that's not in a professional capacity. Because like obviously, like even if one of our city council members or a county commissioner or something like that doesn't have to necessarily use public funds to still be viewed in their professional capacity if they attend certain events or they participate in certain television shows or that kind of thing. It kind of just goes with the territory that you're aware that you're carrying the state's logo with you as you move around through social situations. So that just kind of jumped out at me about the AG. Very peculiar, very peculiar.
It is, and I think another thing I made a post on Twitter about that and quoted him and the sovereignty and the all this stuff, which clearly he's, donning a cowboy hat. These guys, I mean, they have a very specific message that is aimed at a specific segment of people. But, a little dog whistle here and there. But, it is, it's fascinating to me that he is somebody that is by all accounts kind of working with certain tech companies to take away our privacy. And I want to just really quickly read something that I found about Sean Reyes. This was actually published May 19th, 2023, by the Democratic Attorney General Association. And I will read a couple paragraphs here. A recent special report for the Salt Lake City Tribune revealed Utah's Republican AG Sean Reyes close ties to surveillance and data collection company named Banjo. And Jack, you and I have done some things about and mentioned Banjo before. That is raising a lot of questions and posing some serious concerns for Utah voters. According to the report, Reyes, who was up for re-election this November, struck up a cozy relationship with a company building a massive real-time surveillance system that listens to 911 calls throughout the state, monitors traffic cameras, the location of police cars, your social media, and much more. And it appears that Reyes created this relationship through improper channels. In November of 2018, the Attorney General's office worked to bypass the normal procurement process to secure a sole source $750,000 contract with Banjo, according to emails the Salt Lake Tribune obtained through public records requests. Even more telling, according to the Tribune, Banjo's lobbyist used to work for the Attorney General Reyes, the chief of staff, and previously served as the executive director for the Utah Republican Party. Reyes is simply doing his friends some favors and bending the rules to do it. This is another clear example of the kind of corruption and dealing that has no place in the office of the Utah Attorney General. Although providing resources to law enforcement is critical to keeping Utah communities safe, it is deeply concerning to security experts, professors, and civil libertarians that Reyes-sponsored surveillance is untested, unregulated. Even Utah's House Majority Leader from Reyes' own party called the technology Orwellian and North Korean-esque. I think there's a potential danger there in a number of ways. Sean Lawson, an associate professor at the University of Utah who teaches courses on topics like surveillance and counterterrorism. And so again, that was an article from May of this year from the Democratic Attorney General. And so that does raise questions about, what's going on here. Here you can say that I'm protecting sovereign rights and people and, civil liberties and things, but yet you're doing things and associating with tech companies that are clearly trying to, subvert some of those things. So, I mean, what are your thoughts?
Yes, I do recall that the banjo um, program, the hardware, was considered by civil rights groups to be quite hardline, very questionable. Uh, was considered, borderline tyrannical, if not so, as far as civil rights and infringing on them went. But I'll tell you the truth, the main thing that stands out in my memory about banjo is that some of its original leadership, if I recall correctly, had to resign or was on the verge because they had these very lucrative public contracts, and their history of right-wing extremism and racism.
I think at one point in time, the head of Banjo was a member of the KKK, right?
Correct. As I don't remember exactly what it was, but was involved in some crimes even, and if I recall correctly, decided the most intelligent thing to do was to step away. But I really don't remember the details. I'd be kind of winging it on that. But yes, the banjo's original leadership was convicted of as I recall, right-wing extremism, criminal activity, and was particularly of concern given that they were involved with the public law enforcement community and making surveillance equipment for them. Yes.
Yeah, very, very interesting. So again, it's a tangled web that we weave here in Utah, and I, my whole thing, and I think yours as well. I'll just speak for you. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think, for us to shine a light not only on the utter nonsense that has been put forward for 3 decades now about a place that has never been, there's never been anything substantiated about any of the myths that they've promoted, and there never will be. You can guarantee that. But I also think because of the larger implications about the people who are involved in a broader sense, I think those things are very telling, and it's very telling when you have, here we're inviting. Oh my gosh, Post Malone up to the ranch to sit in the corner with his AR-15 and things like that. And you just think, I mean, what is going on? It's not research, so it's very interesting. But to me, that's obviously important because I've studied that area for many, many years, and I feel, as somebody who lives in Utah and as somebody who has seen people get hurt by specific claims made in the UFO community, that I have an obligation to speak out about this and inform people so they can make better decisions.
Good for you. And I appreciate the leadership that you show with expanding frontiers, and I think you do a really good job with that, and I appreciate that. One of the things that I was not as aware of, and I'm kind of speaking to the listeners and viewers when I say this, until I collaborated more with Erica, was I was not aware of how there is this economic subculture around the Uinta Basin about Skinwalker Ranch, and that people come from near and far to act as YouTube personalities and quote unquote researchers and things like that. And I became more aware of this kind of ecosystem um, after I had been interacting more closely with Erica. And one of the things that stands out to me about these conferences and things is how there seems to be um, a somewhat of a hierarchy of whose businesses get to be involved and whose don't, and whose books get highlighted and whose don't. And that's not something that I would say is exclusive to the paranormal by any means. I mean, there's always going to be a certain amount of who you know and who you're involved with and stuff. But that's just something that I thought I'd mention and note, because those of us that are further away geographically may have this false impression that there's like a couple dozen people that are into this thing in Utah. And I've come to find out it's a whole thing, that people are like staying at campgrounds and dedicating themselves to trying to break in. You know, it reminds me a bit of, you know, hitchhike to LA with a guitar kind of thing. You know, take your phone and your YouTube account to Utah, you know, and see if you can get viral.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's exactly it. But I do have to give a shout out to Jody and Stacy at the UFO campground, because they're both just really lovely people, and I think they've done a good job to make the most of it. And they've got a beautiful campsite. I was actually talking, telling one of my friends today. It's like, oh God, do I want to go back up there and go camping? It's like this aversion therapy, Skinwalker style, that it is really beautiful, and they do a great, great job with that and make the best of it. But it is interesting. It's like a LARP, I mean, here we go, and you can't get into the ranch, but I would definitely wager a bet that pretty soon people will start getting on the ranch. I think I heard a rumbling that the History Channel was offering a stay at the ranch. So they were
Hmm.
doing some sort of contest to see who could stay at the ranch, and um, that could be interesting, you know.
Yeah, yeah. One of the Another thing that kind of gets me about it is I think a lot of people are sincere. In fact, I know they are. There's a lot of people that are just interested in potential paranormal phenomena, and there's different demographics even within the Skinwalker demographic. And some of us go all the way back to when George Knapp's book first came out, and when we were first hearing John Alexander telling Art Bell about this craziness and all this kind of stuff. And then there's others that came along more frequently and might know some things about the supposed OSAP program. And then there's others that might really not know much about it at all, other than the latest reported ownership. And a lot of those people, I think, are sincere and they want to believe people and all. But where I really start wondering about the the people that promote this story is that it always seems so attached to money lines
Right.
and public offices and intelligence agencies, and that makes me more concerned about the agendas. And I mean, when push comes to shove, and we've talked about this, just ad infinitum, I don't think there's anyone that truly understands definitions of scientific investigation that would say that what we see on the History Channel or the A&E network about Skinwalker Ranch would be considered scientific investigation. So I really don't have to understand their motives and all these different layers of motives, ranging from city managers and director of tourism and travel, all the way down to the guys that are just trying to make a living on YouTube, all the way into the inner sanctum of the actual ranch cast members and personnel, to be able to identify that at the heart of this, they are either incompetent or deceptive. I really don't see how that could go one way or the other. People can become really motivated to see things a certain way if it helps their wallet to do so. So that can be possible. But you either don't understand what science is or you're intentionally misrepresenting it. And I really don't see any way around that.
Right, right. And I mean, I don't think launching a rocket up into, launching a rocket and then, oh my gosh, it hit something and, there's an object above the ranch. I mean, what? I mean, the first scene of the first show is people, preying on the helicopter. So right away we knew this is just not an objective thing. This is about entertainment. And I think that was probably fairly clear when we saw the way adamantium, that was structured for, the entertainment industry. And that was the main goal, to get a TV show and to continue the TV show, which I will congratulate them on. They've done, and now they've expanded to a new show where they're adding a couple more characters. And like I mentioned on Twitter, I'm sure I could pretty much guess who that will be, promoting other places that are alleged to have activity that, the Bigelow Boys were claiming. So it's really, it's interesting. It doesn't say very much for the History Channel, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, let's not be naive here. I mean, the cable networks are capitalist ventures. They want to create entertainment, and they've obviously, tapped into some things that are successful enough by their definition that they're willing to ride it out a while further. The obvious concern with this is when the public gets gaslighted and led to believe that there is something educational or scientific about this kind of thing. It reminds me, I always think of Robert Schaefer, who I asked to contribute some content for a blog post one time, and he did so. And one of the things he pointed out was that, I'll paraphrase here, but he was talking about MUFON and saying, I don't think anyone would really mind what they do if they just called it entertainment and everybody got together and had fun and talked about aliens and saucers. And if that's what they're interested in, fine. But why do they have to put this veneer of science on it? If they just wouldn't call it science, then like that's where the complaint comes. And as you alluded to, Erica, with public officials getting involved with Skinwalker Ranch, these people are literally asserting that there is a public health risk there. And then public officials visit the ranch, and their actions do not display any concern whatsoever about these kinds of things. And so we just get into some concerning aspects of like I've heard it said on some of the ballots for November that some of the candidates are not really opposing um, their peer on the ballot as much as they are running against the truth. That they are attacking the fact-finding process and trying to denigrate that. And I think there's something to be said for that in the whole thing. And I'll even carry that thought to where I saw that Colm Kelleher was presenting at Rice University, the Archive of the Impossible. And I just think that these are very concerning things to be happening, that one compromise at a time, we end up with someone that is a proven, like just again and again and again, an unreliable narrator that is offered a podium in an academic setting to continue this unreliable narrative.
Right. And it's always amazed me that the cast of characters that have surrounded the ranch have, it's like you've got Winterton, who had a alleged head injury at the ranch. And, you've got people like Dr. Jim Segala, who was his doctor. And, what are Segala's credentials to treat a brain injury? There's so many suspect things that if people actually like just stood back and, looked at things, it's like, wait a minute, how does this make sense? Why are these people involved? Like, where is the evidence? We've been, especially with Brandon Fugel, we've been promised since the moment he purchased the ranch that he would have he would be very transparent and have, as he likes to phrase it, an open kimono, which, it's kind of a little frightening, but that's okay. But, if you're being transparent, then you are the type of person that can go onto a show like mine and be asked hard questions and answer those questions. You're not the type of person that sits behind the scenes and calls up people on Twitter that are, posting and then talks in a disparaging way about people. You have a face-to-face, as in the business community as well. If you're truly a leader in the business community, you are willing to hash things out person to person, and you're willing to do that, especially, when you're going on social media and saying things, you're willing to do that in a public forum. And I think that's what has really been lacking from this crew. It's you say something or ask questions that are actually very valid questions, and that just doesn't fly. And not only that, but then you start seeing some of the people or whatever in the social media circles who hide behind anonymous names, who like to get in there and troll people who ask questions. It's really a strange thing, and none of it bodes well for integrity or scientific research.
No, it does not. The injuries, the reported injuries, that is a excellent example that is something that could be drilled down with, and that could be presented in a coherent, linear manner of, here's the day that happened, here was the follow-ups on it, here's what the experts say, and here is the documentation, here are the people available for comment if so. There's any number of ways that could be presented coherently and intelligently. And when intelligent people don't present things coherently and in a linear, logical manner, then I mean the implications are obvious. It's an insult to intelligence, really. That and as you know, Erica, I took these injury claims not just around Skinwalker, but the whole thing that we hear Dr. Nolan talk about, and Kit Green and Jim Simivan and others. And I did a deep dive into that, and I would appreciate it if people understood a little better where we get our cynical perspectives. When you do a deep dive on things like that and people repeatedly either won't talk to you at all or accuse you of you just won't believe it, so I'm not gonna give you the proof. That's really an insult to intelligence. My experience and that of professional journalists, which I do not claim to be, but the professional journalists share with me, is when someone has the goods, they want to yell it from the rooftops.
Right.
They want everybody to have it. They would ram it down my throat if they had what I was asking them for. And I would like people to understand that again and again and again, what happens in these circumstances, repeatedly, I requested things from some of the Skinwalker cast members, other people in ufology that make strong claims. Diana Pasulka, Gary Nolan. I mean, like you mentioned earlier, I've got 10 years worth of a blog that's documenting
Right.
attempts to get people to explain what the hell they're talking about. And not only do they avert from it when you point blank ask them to offer evidence that would be recognized in the professional research community as credible, some of them really start massaging their language and trying to change what it was they said and tell you, oh, well, you can get that from my staff member. And then the staff member is like, I don't know what the hell he's talking about. And when you have that happen again and again and again and again, you really come to doubt this person's sincerity.
Right. And I think that's been, at least in my journey through all of this, I mean, I am the type of person who trusts people. I've learned a lot of lessons through this, my adventures in ufology, but I want to believe the best in people, and I give people chances, as I did with, the Skinwalker Ranch team, and I really genuinely believed that they were doing something worthy and of note. And then when things started to, I started to have questions, and I was documenting and doing things it was just really amazing to see what transpired at that point. And again, it's like, nothing has changed. It's like Groundhog Day. And the really interesting thing with, the Androffel files that I have spent obviously the past 10 days going through, and she was meticulous. You wouldn't believe the gems in her archive, but looking back and seeing her notes of, she was at this conference, and here comes the Bob Lazar story, here comes Cooper, here comes Eric Davis, and the same types of things. And it's like, it just keeps on repeating. The same people keep repeating and trying to promote absolute garbage. And at the end of the day, it's like, where is it, Jacques Vallée? Trinity? Oh, how did that work out for you? What's happening with I mean, Kit Green and any of these people. It's just it's really a clown show, and it's sad because this subject should be, there should be something worthy. There is something worthy of study without this circus. So for me, I mean, I think if you really actually care about the integrity of the subject and maybe trying to find something new, making discoveries, then you would absolutely stand up and say, nope, Skinwalker Ranch discredits this subject. It demeans this subject. Travis Taylor demeans this subject. Brandon Fugel demeans this subject. And then we would, move away and try to work in a different place. But until that happens, it's got to keep shining a light on it. So.
I think too, as I mentioned earlier, the money trail is really important here, and it's often obstructed in UFO circles and conferences. One of the things that I noticed, the more I started looking at the intelligence community, the more I couldn't help but notice some things about the UFO community that are just so well set up to enable assets from intelligence agencies. And one of those things is this unwarranted, really, in many instances, degree of secrecy. That it's almost like it's considered rude to ask somebody their name or where they work or what do you do or where do you live. It's kind of built in to the UFO narrative, and this goes way back, 80s, 90s, probably much earlier, but I became aware of it in the latter 20th century, that there's almost like an anonymity about, like, if you're at a regional MUFON meeting or somewhere that people are going to be talking about their UFO sightings and their interactions with these non-human entities and things like that, that you don't ask them who they are, or if they just use a first name, that's just enough. And finally, some researchers started saying, we really need to know more here, like, childhood upbringing, relationship status. There's a lot of other social factors here. But my point right now is the secrecy really enables bad and deceptive actors, and it's just built into the whole narrative. And I have come with you, Erica, the work we have done and the FOIA requests and the GRAMA requests in the state of Utah that we have had filled. I have come to think that the primary story here is the money trail.
Absolutely.
And I think that the UFO story is wandering out into the weeds.
Absolutely.
Even though it's more popular and more prominent. And I realize a lot of people that are interested in those saucers and those entities would be like, I just don't care about Nazi propaganda, and I don't care that the guy had to resign from his position because he was arrested on, being involved in a drive-by shooting and yada, yada, yada. I realize that to a lot of people, that just doesn't move the ball down the field of what did I see in Iowa in 1993. I understand that. But I think that is largely an obstruction of the real story. and that is the industry, the financial industries that capitalize on the UFO narrative and on demographics that identify people that would be interested in that narrative as their kind of people that they would want to also advertise their products and services to.
And political agendas, yeah, so it is very interesting to see. And like I mentioned earlier in the show, it is very interesting to see the Utah Attorney General, flying certain flags and things, and just again, the show is going so off the mark from actually conducting research. It's just clearly it's promoting a certain narrative politically, I believe. Absolutely. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But I think at the end of the day, it's not going to be a good look for the Attorney General. And I think people that are credible people in the business community and in the political world in Utah probably won't see that as something that is admirable at all, because it really does lower the bar when it comes to using your political position to promote a fictional narrative. That's pretty bad.
I can certainly empathize with that position. And I really don't have anything to add to that. I can certainly understand why you'd feel that way. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And so let's talk a little bit about the money trail. You've done in the UFO Trail blog over the years, you've looked into specific money trails or lack thereof, and have raised questions about what people, organizations, nonprofits are doing with money. And so talk a little bit about one of the investigations that you did and how that played out.
Oh boy. What's funny, Erica, and one of the reasons Erica would be aware of this, so again, I'll kind of talk to the audience here. One of the reasons that Erica and I began interacting and collaborating more is all of this stuff really ties together. And one way or another, you can look at like a turn of the century collaboration between some UFO organizations, and it's always like just two or three things removed from something that went on at Skinwalker Ranch, and somebody that donated money to one of these organizations, and you're just kind of like, huh. And just to make a really brief snapshot of a complicated chain of events, to answer your question, I would say the ambient monitoring project was just fascinating, in that it was a originally named the Abduction Monitoring Project, and was billed as a collaboration between some three UFO organizations: MUFON, FUFOR, and KUFOS. Feel like Daffy Duck yelling at Bugs Bunny when I say that. Under the flag of the UFO Research Coalition, or UFORC. And the most significant thing about this project was that it never reported what it did. And Tom Dooley was kind of the de facto spokesperson. And all of these organizations essentially consisted of the same group of men. And there were just some oddities about why would you keep incorporating another organization and another organization. Like supposedly UFORC was incorporated to have the other three collaborate within it. And that really only makes sense to people that don't know anything about nonprofit organizations and collaborations.
Right.
We would not need another organization incorporated to collaborate with another archive. We just collaborate with them. And so there were a lot of oddities about it. And I noticed that Jan Aldrich commented on your show last week that the Prince of Liechtenstein donated to one of these organizations, and that's really peculiar to me. So we know that these organizations consisted of people that were in the intelligence community. They have board members of people that got security clearances, that worked for intelligence agencies. And I'm not necessarily implying anything more or less than what I just said by that. And then we know that Liechtenstein is a nation that is a very geographically small nation that had already gotten on our radar because it's been heavily implicated in the global financial community as a haven for the wealthy. It's
Right.
a place.
Yep.
Yes, and tax evasion, and had a number of problems about this. And so we had already submitted, but long before Mr. Aldrich mentioned this last week, we had submitted FOIA requests to the FBI on some of the key people in Liechtenstein, and as cited in news articles over the years about tax evasion circumstances and investigations. And the FBI denied our requests on exemptions of privacy. We appealed that, and they denied the appeal. And so where I'm headed with all this is it's just so difficult for me to think, given all those circumstances, that the Prince of Liechtenstein was just interested in giving money towards UFO study. To be completely honest, it's hard to say that with a straight face, to be completely honest. I am in no position to make any accusations. I certainly can't prove any of them. Just when you have enough circumstances pile up, and not only do these people never prove anything unusual is going on, they won't even show you what they did. It's really hard for me to think that the motives and agendas are all as stated.
Right. And I definitely feel after many years of looking into things that Bigelow's interest in UFOs is genuine. I think, again, it's like just another person who, oh, hey, my family had a sighting, or, back when I was a child, and it's just this account, and it's a way to put their hook into a community and, do whatever they're doing behind the scenes. But there are some very interesting questions that should be raised, I believe, about like why appear out of nowhere, who introduced who to whom, and what was going on behind the scenes with the money. And I do believe from some of the research that you've done, you noted that there were chunks of funding that was allocated, but those weren't displayed in the tax returns, correct?
There were statements made by leadership of these organizations that were not reflected in their 990 IRS forms, which, yes, is an organizational tax return. They claim to have been granted funds or contributed funds, and if they did, they didn't report it properly. And that wouldn't be all that big a stretch to believe. I actually think that a lot of the time, uh, often people that get involved in the nonprofit sector don't know anything about the nonprofit sector. They just want to do what they do and get invited to be involved in it. And so they do. And they don't really know anything about nonprofit management, which is a whole specialized skill in itself. So I don't really fault people. They should have their 990s in order, and they should be able to account for things to a minimum transparency threshold. But I can understand why they don't, because they never even knew they were going to have to. Not that that relieves them of responsibility. No. But no, we were not able to find in the 990s that we reviewed of these different organizations. I was not able to locate things that would reflect some of the things that they suggested. And this is another good example of a story where the ambient monitoring project of that, when you deal with this personally and you've talked to these people, emailed them, talked to them face to face over months and years, that you realize when they've changed stories, or when sometimes it's not even changing stories as much as it just doesn't make sense. And so they'll just stop talking to you. There were personnel that the name escapes me momentarily. It's funny how when you get on the internet that happens, isn't it? Mm-hmm. What was Kehoe's right hand man that was worked with Gordon?
Not Richard Hall.
Yeah. Hall went on to work with FUFOR, among other groups. And one time on UFO Updates list, Richard Hall was annoyed, seemingly, that people were questioning the circumstances surrounding what came to be known as the AMP. And he made a remark about, well, if somebody had just come up with the $5,000 to have this data analyzed, they'd be happy to have it analyzed. And that did not coincide with statements other people were making, including that at one point, Dooley had claimed that it had already been turned over to a professor at the University of New Mexico, I think it was, mm-hmm. or a couple of places, and that the funds were in hand to have it done and all this. And then they say they don't have the money. And then Richard Hall says, $5,000, put your money where your mouth is, essentially was his position. And so a lot of people were like, that's really not an amount of money that's beyond feasible for a civilian group to get together and raise. And, who wants to pitch in, and let's see what this data says. And then Clift with MUFON incrementally upped it to like $25,000 and then $50,000 over the course of, like, I don't remember, 2 weeks or something, he was on interviews throwing out figures that that were clearly just arbitrarily off the top of his head, trying to make it an amount of money that was prohibitive. And I think what happens in these circumstances, Erica, I think some of these guys just want to appear they're in the loop and knows what's going on, and that they're ashamed to even say, I'm the director of the organization and nobody will tell me squat about the amp. I don't know what happened. I think that happens sometimes. I don't think that bodes well for the guys that have security clearances that tell the director of the organization it's none of your business what we're doing. I don't think that bodes well at all. But I think it happens. And again, I think the story there is the money trail and using nonprofits as conduits for whatever it was that was actually going on. And if that's not, like, at the least, I think that's the story in showing the incompetence and the waste. Like if really you spent money building and designing these devices that you put in people's homes to monitor the ambient atmosphere and conditions, and you gathered the data, you used dedicated phone lines to gather this data and make sure it wasn't tampered with, and you did everything but analyze and publish it. If that's truly what happened, well, then they need to be held accountable for the waste that reflects.
Lots of interesting questions. And again, I'm sure that there are people that don't have, like you stress, the understanding of the way a nonprofit is structured or works, that gets involved in things, and there could be, obviously other people that have more nefarious motivations with things and understand. I'm not saying that this is the case, with that project, but I think, especially with the real estate market, you can see real estate as a really great way to launder money. And there are specific red flags if you do research on money laundering in real estate. You can look for those red flags, and it's very telling. And so you look at other ways to hide and shuffle money around and things, and that's, it's quite an interesting journey down that hole.
I can understand why you say that. And I think many of the folks in chat are aware of our blog posts. In the event, some listeners later, might not be, I would invite people to go to expandingfrontiersresearch.org and find our blog. It's in the menu at the top of the page. And I think it was in February, Erica and I published a blog post on following the money. And it was about the overlap of the cryptocurrency world and UFO promoters. And this kind of arose out of Erica had gone to a conference in Vernal, Utah, and proceeded to watch speakers pitch cryptocurrency all weekend. And we were like, what's this all about? And let's just take a look around and see how prevalent it is. And in that blog post, we share what we found about Avi Loeb was a featured speaker with Eric Weinstein at a Bitcoin symposium. We found that various people tried to fund their websites and their UFO research through selling digital images and the cryptocurrency market. We found that Brandon Fugel sits on the Utah Blockchain Advisory Board and was frequently tweeting about SafeMoon and using their hashtags, as well as some other cryptocurrency types. And SafeMoon, by the way, is a Utah-based cryptocurrency. And so Erica and I did some FOIA requests on these different currencies and shared what we found in this blog post. And SafeMoon in particular, for those that are unaware of it, was a very volatile cryptocurrency. And it was launched in the spring of 2021, and it gets its name from being an alleged safe ride to the moon financially. And it was launched and skyrocketed, and under a heavy PR campaign in which musical performers and some high-profile personalities boosted the brand, and then it crashed. And by the end of that year, it had lost about 98% of its value, and it has never, from its highest point, and it has never regained that. And there were class action lawsuits filed in which Caroni is the name, I believe, of the CEO now, and other leadership were accused of paying the performers and the high-profile personalities in cash and cryptocurrency to promote it on social media and things. And I don't know the status of those lawsuits currently. There were 3. I was looking the other day, and I think there were 3. And in other circumstances, celebrities have been fined substantial amounts. Kim Kardashian was one.
Right.
For making a post on social media promoting a cryptocurrency and not flagging it as an ad.
Wasn't Jimmy Kimmel as well? Or not? Was it Jimmy Kimmel that was the other late night talk show host?
I wouldn't know. Okay. I don't know. So one of the cryptocurrencies that we did FOIA requests on was SafeMoon, and we got a substantial amount of material from the SEC and the Federal Trade Commission. And our latest blog post is what we received from the CFPB, which is a Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And there are just dozens and dozens of complaints filed about that when people tried to withdraw their money, they wouldn't let them. Like, as they were seeing it crash, that's the allegation, that they couldn't pull their money out, that it was misrepresented to them how it would be done, that it didn't work how they thought it would, that some say just flat out ripped off, that they just got told your account, the value of your account has lost, and that when they try to get clarification on this, they just send them instructions of how the platform works. And so we were concerned about these businesses being promoted among people that promote stories about dogmen coming through portals on dirt farms. And we looked at a timeline, and this is explained in these blog posts, that after these, after it had crashed, after these class action lawsuits had been filed and were in the paper and on media sites being reported to have been filed, that Brandon Fugel was tweeting about visiting Safe Moon and strategizing with its owners. And we located a YouTube video that was posted by a young man that is into cryptocurrency and has a substantial following. It's a highly visible platform, and they were discussing on his show that Fugel has he's saying he's in on Safe Moon, and they were analyzing Fugel's statements that he said he owns more than most, and Fugel had gotten in an argument on Twitter where his investment expertise was challenged, that people that are in that community and knew what was happening to Safe Moon were challenging his knowledge, and he was defending his knowledge, and again said that he owned more Safe Moon than most. And we reached out to him, and he said clearly to me, he denied that he was ever compensated by Safe Moon for his implied endorsements, and claimed that last he looked, he had lost over 90% of his investment. And so again, see, we're left here with a guy that when he is asked directly, as I have done, like a specific instance was, you claim you have documented law enforcement visits to the ranch. Can I see that? And he says, yeah, absolutely. And he gives me the contact info of someone that works for him that tells me I don't have any law enforcement reports. I've got the witness testimony of a guy that, worked for the sheriff 40 years ago. And so we have this, and when he does things like that, Fugel will claim in this very interaction, he told me, my track record speaks for itself. I've done this, I've done that. Look at all this real estate I've sold, yada, yada, which is just completely beside the point of, well, we were talking about law enforcement reports,
right?
Not real estate deeds. But my point here is, when you look closer at that track record, it's really not as unimpeachable as he likes to tell people it is.
Well, and I think the Firmage example of
Firmage
whatever we can.
And with Safe Moon, at best, he didn't know what the hell he was talking about. I mean, like, how else can you look at that? I mean, like, that's a best case scenario. He didn't know what the hell he was talking about and doesn't take responsibility for the amount of followers he has, and that the crypto community will look at him as someone that like, I mean, look, Fugel says he's on board with Safe Moon, and they're going to take that as an indicator. They're at least going to weigh it in their assessments.
Right. And I wonder how instrumental he was.
Seems to be conveniently oblivious to this.
When I wonder how, when you look back at the whole Joe Firmage, Kit Green, I mean, that whole, gyroscope debacle. And, there's a video that is out there for everybody to see, and you can see the usual suspects there and this great technology. And then you also hear the stories about certain people losing millions of dollars, and that's why they can't talk about it. But yet they do talk about it, and they try to pin it all on Firmage, which I find fascinating. But again, it's the same cast of characters who allegedly have, lost money or lost other people's money, or things like that you've seen kind of time and time again. And so at some point in time, people do need to get over that kind of I'm a fanboy, and here's somebody who's just, seems so on top of things, but yet, you look at other behavior and okay, maybe not. and that is important. It is important. If you say that the police have been out to the ranch, which was Stephen Greenstreet did a little short about that, and was asking, I think, Caleb or Brandon said that yes, there were police that have been called out to the ranch, but then we know that some of these things they can't be verified. And I would think if I was the person in charge of a scientific investigation and putting that forward to the public, I would have everything logged to a T and ready to go publicly.
Yeah, or you'd at least understand the rules of engagement. Yeah, like I mentioned Robert Schaefer earlier, and I'll bring him up again because he and I don't always agree on everything, but I can concede that we can agree what the facts are. We may not agree what they indicate, but we can agree the fact is ABC. I think it might be this, and he'll be, well, it's your burden of proof to come up with it's anything more than incompetence. That's where Robert always falls, is they're buffoons, and and there's something to be said for that, definitely. I think what you're bringing up now, Erica, reiterates my point about the story here is the money, and the UFO stuff actually obstructs it. Erica and I have done a significant amount of investigative research and FOIA work on circumstances surrounding Joseph Firmage and Mini One and the corporations that he was involved with. He repeatedly does not respond to our requests to discuss it with us. We queried many of the same organization or same agencies that we did about Safe Moon, and you can find that work on our blog as well at Expanding Frontiers Research. And one of the things that I found of interest with the SEC, we managed to get interviews that were conducted while the SEC was investigating Many One. And that is what arose out of this nonsense about anti-gravity devices and all of that. And one of the people that was investigated described their position as being in a position to know and to have wanted to invest more money in it, but wanted to review the books in order to have a better idea. And they described it in just disarray, that it was just constant robbing Peter to pay Paul, and a lot of questionable, a lot of questions about different people's involvement and what it was they were trying to do. But one of the things that really stood out to me about the material Erica and I obtained from the SEC on Many One was that this individual claimed he could account for $59 million that went through Mini One. That's what he alleged that he saw in their books. Maybe it's not true, maybe he misspoke. Maybe the books were not kept correctly. But my point is, when we talk about this gyroscope we saw on a video in a warehouse, and people talk about they lost their money, I think most people are thinking 5 digits, maybe 6. I don't think people are thinking $59 million got spent jacking around in a warehouse with Hal Puthoff.
Well, I could think of better uses for funding. Yeah, I mean, it is really interesting. And again, it goes to kind of show the same group of people, again, involved in, a grift here, a grift there. And so it's very interesting for people that don't know who Joe Firmage is. Joe Firmage was very big in the UFO scene back in the 90s. He was just a genius as a young man, and he's from Utah. His father was a law professor at the University of Utah, and he was a tech guy and made billions of dollars very quickly when he was under 18. His mom, Gloria, was kind of the person that was handling his finances and his life for him. And he, obviously when you're that young and you have that much money, things happen. But Firmage gets involved with, and I'm not sure, and I would love to know the origin story of how Fugel got involved with Firmage. We all know it's a small town, but I would love to look into that and then just see how they were connected. And it was interesting because Firmage came out and he was on national TV talking about in fact, I seem to remember, I need to go back and look at this, and maybe some of you in chat can help me, but I seem to recall reading that he was approached by somebody. Oh my gosh. And after he was approached, and I need to look at this and do some fact checking. After he was approached, that's when he claimed that he had this UFO sighting that was very much like the sighting that Joseph Smith had. And so kind of from there, it was, into the UFO field we go, and we're spending all of this money to put an ad on I believe the New York Times about UFOs and things. And it was interesting to see, especially in the archive that I have, how many people, including, people in MUFON, that approached Firmage to try to get funding for different projects. And so, I mean, the whole thing is an interesting story. He definitely was a very brilliant man at one point in his career, and how he got involved with all these people and where it went awry would be an interesting story to follow up on.
Well, that definitely plays into it for me with the are they incompetent or deceptive question. I don't think many of these people we've talked about are stupid. There's some really smart guys that we have mentioned or alluded to tonight, and it's difficult to think in all of these circumstances that they're as deluded about unproven claims as they seem to be. But not to throw you off track here, but while I'm thinking about it, you mentioned that you wonder how they meet. There were some people involved in the Gulf Breeze story back in the day that when I came along a few years after the fact and was trying to piece it together, that I was having trouble saying like, yeah, I know you hung out in Gulf Breeze, but like once upon a time, there was the first time you ever went.
Right.
Can you describe the and it is funny how people will start averting from this, and you're like, huh, like like part of me thinks if it was really something nefarious, they'd have a cover story, and they just don't want to tell me something embarrassing, or
Right.
like you just wonder. But another instance of that, out of all of the stuff I did and all of the people I talked to and all the stuff I read, I never so much as found a rumor or a legend of how Donald Kehoe met Townsend Brown.
Hmm.
Don't know. Ask the old timers. Don't know. Nobody ever cared. Don't know how these two guys met.
Okay.
Seems like there'd be like just even if it wasn't true, it seems like they would have had a cool story or something. I can kind of understand where they didn't, and I'm talking about the first two directors of NICAP, and they sat on the same board together the first few months while Brown directed it. But like even there were stories about this woman had saucer club meetings at her farmhouse, and Townsend Brown went there, and then they started meeting at his house, and around the kitchen table they came up with the name NICAP. And you have these stories, and it's like just suddenly Donald Kehoe's in them. And like I was joking just now about Gulf Breeze. Well, at some point there was the first time he ever went to Townsend's house. Can anybody explain the circumstances this was under? And apparently, no, they cannot.
Dang, that would be good though. That would really be good. And I think these origin stories, I mean, of how people met and why and their associations is definitely an important part of all this, just like with Firmage and Fugal and Putoff and Firmage and I mean all of these this cast of characters. And I want to just address something that I'm seeing going on in chat, and this is an interesting conversation for me being a woman from Utah. But I want to address the Mormonism, and I know that's not the right word to use because we're not supposed to be doing that, but it has been kind of promoted that the Mormon faith is really all about extraterrestrials, and having been involved with that and having I mean, I've got books, religious books from the Mormon church that date back 80, 90, 100 years. My great-great-grandfather was in the Quorum of the 70. And there was really, I don't know of any real mention of UFOs and extraterrestrials in Mormon literature, or, I mean, if you talk to, I've got several people that I know that I ask this question to that are higher ranking members of the church, and that's just something that is not even, it's just not even there. And so I wonder, again, if Mormonism isn't used as a way to glamorize things and make something mystical when that really wasn't a part of things. And I look at, I look at Adolf Hitler and the way the occult and, the Nazis and the flying saucers and the way that was kind of spun into something that was something other than it was, just to promote a specific thing. I get the feeling that's kind of what has been done as far as the Mormon religion and UFOs. And I would love, love, love to have a conversation with Stephen Greenstreet about this, because I know we both have backgrounds in this, and so that would be a fun talking point. But I definitely, like I said, I think a specific group of characters has put that into the narrative. So what are your thoughts about that, Jack?
I can tell you, as someone who knew little about the Mormon faith, and I am not read on the world's religions. Um, from a distance, I would I've like gone back and watched Joe Firmage's earlier interviews where he'd be on these morning news shows, and he's talking about, call me crazy, but here's what happened, and he tells his story and everything. And I've seen some other people, in Utah, and share their experiences. And I did start to kind of get this feeling um, of like, wow, does like everybody in Utah think that they're a Joseph Smith, and they've got the story, and in the way that I've seen people in other regions of the country maybe identify, if nothing else, subconsciously, with people that are historic in their faith and stuff. And then, like, that's kind of the first level. And then the closer you look at it, you get to the part that I've seen in other parts of the country too. That's, oh no, some of them just want you to think they believe that they're another Joseph Smith. And I think that plays into it too. That they don't believe that they had interactions with divine beings. They're looking for a following that will believe they had interactions with divine beings. And I've suspected some of that is going on as well. And again, we'll get back to when the balance in your bank account depends on whether you're a divine member of the human race or not. Maybe you'll almost start to believe it yourself when there's millions of dollars to be had from people that prefer those kinds of narratives.
And absolutely, you're correct. And I also want to say that I find it interesting that there have been a handful of people in Utah, especially, who have brought up this satanic aspect. And in fact, there have been
always a crowd pleaser.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And there have been a handful of people that were involved in a scandal in Utah allegedly involving this kind of child abuse and satanic kind of scandal, which is interesting. It was, in my opinion, used as a political tool. But again, you look at the Skinwalker Ranch, which is a great example of using all these kind of little hooks, I guess. So you've got the satanic worshipers, and you hear people, oh my gosh, I was on the periphery of the ranch and I stumbled across this, little sacrament, or like a little altar, and the Satan worshipers were there. And I mean, this has been the whole thing for forever. And then you've got the religious aspect and the end of times, and Annie, get your guns. You've got to be stockpiling for the end of humanity, and then you've got the kind of like the FEMA death camps, and oh my sovereignty, and all of the stuff that is rolled into one, that plays out in some of these scenarios, or at the ranch in particular. And it's fascinating. But I definitely think that aspect, the aspect of the mystical part of the Mormon church, I think that's the show me the evidence that there was ever anything to do with the UFO and the Mormon religion. Please Just like the same thing I would ask if there is, where is the origin story for the myth of the curse of the Skinwalker? Where is it? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, and scholars tell Erica that that are qualified experts that it's just not what the sensationalists have claimed it to be. It's just not.
No, it's a piece of property that, really wasn't glamorous. And you've got I'm origin story is a big thing for me tonight, but you've got this, the Deseret News, Zach Van Eck. You've got a couple publications, that UFO publications that were promoting the Utah UFO Ranch, and then the Bigelow era where, we're conducting this top secret research, but everybody knows the coordinates to the ranch, and here we are. And then just one lie after another one, completely imposterous story. It's fascinating, and I'm really happy to be working with you and digging into things that can be validated. If somebody's making a statement, you can do a grammar request and you can validate specific statements. And what we're seeing here is a pattern of statements that are being made publicly that cannot be validated with information.
Right. And like you mentioned, Stephen Greenstreet. I think that one of his positions, if I understand it correctly, was a bridge too far was claiming that people could get killed, by orbs that follow them home from the ranch, that kind of thing. And yeah, these kinds of things should be able to be substantiated, or you could at least we have at least checked who was this reported to, and nobody. And then it's kind of a double-edged sword. Not only did they not report it, but it's costing these agencies, radiation and nuclear control agencies, time and resources and manpower when they're running down reports they get from concerned citizens that apparently are just scared from watching the show and things like this. And uh, it really interested me that a spokesperson for the AG's office was willing to talk to KSL when I have strong reason to believe they've declined to talk to a number of other journalists.
Right. Yeah, it is. It is interesting, and I think we definitely have some new projects that are going to be on the books coming up pretty quickly. And
Just today, I right before the show, I filed um, our appeal to, even though the CFPB, gave us some documents, they withheld a lot more than they gave us in that request for documents responsive to SafeMoon. They acknowledged some that there's different offices within the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And they told us that two of its offices had a combined 58 pages of documents, and they withheld 56 pages of that in their entirety. And then they acknowledged they had some letters that were sent to complainants and financial institutions that were responsive, and they didn't tell me how many, they just said that all of those were withheld. And then they provided us a spreadsheet, and everything they provided us is posted in our last blog post that readers can go to our blog and see it. They provided us a spreadsheet, but they acknowledged that they withheld parts of that spreadsheet. And for all of these withholdings, they cited various exemptions that pertain to privacy. And so in our appeal that I submitted today, I argued for expanding frontiers research that we don't have a problem with the withholding of personal identifiable information, but it's difficult for me to envision that out of we're talking dozens, probably hundreds of pages of records here, that couldn't be released in part with select redactions and give the public the gist of what the issues were and what people were complaining had happened and what action was taken as a result of those complaints. That seems to me to be the spirit of the Freedom of Information Act and the spirit of the CFPB. And so hopefully we'll get even more information still.
I think that's incredible. I mean, this is so much fun to work with you, and
Thank you.
yeah, I mean, you do excellent work, and I'm very proud of that, and it's fun. And I think that the really great thing is that you and I, you have a specific skill set, and then I'm coming at it from my place, and between the two of us, it just is a pretty powerful. We're powerful together, and I think that we're going to continue to do good things with regard to exposing people in the right way by using FOIA, by using grammar requests, and that is all very telling.
Yes, and I've told this story before, but for those that haven't heard it, um, I used to watch Erica's show, and I had just started taking notes during the show about people she was talking to and things that I thought, well, that can be the subject of a FOIA request. That everything's not just some nebulous statement that goes off into the ether and there's nothing that can be done about any of it. As you pointed out earlier about head injury, you can substantiate that or not. And when they don't, you kind of wonder about it. But yeah, I would watch Erica's show, and I would submit FOIA requests and began talking to her more and more about it, and asking her, can you tell me the rest of this story and what else we might could do? And she often gives me recommendations of things that might be interesting to request. And we certainly, in the gist of the name of our organization, we are interested in expanding outside what often seem like the confines of the UFO tunnel vision, and that has led us to agencies like the SEC and the Federal Trade Commission, and I would like to see other researchers tap them as well. Like when you're dropping your FOIAs to the FBI or NASA or the DIA, your favorite agencies for UFO stuff, maybe give a thought to, would there be a reason to ask the SEC if they have any responsive records on this topic or this business name or this corporation? And we're expanding our horizons and interested in doing arts projects and humanities projects, and are working behind the scenes with people with specific skill sets and areas of expertise in putting together projects that not all of them are going to come to fruition, but everything doesn't, but the things that we do put together we're confident will be really quality material for people to view and read, and the different types of mediums we're working on to present more projects in the coming weeks, months, and years. Some of them are even long-term ideas.
Right, and thank you, Steve, for the nice comment. Jack and I both appreciate that. It has been a fun process, and like you say, we are working behind the scenes to kind of diversify what we're doing. Which, if we get funding for some of these projects, this could be absolutely amazing, and it will be completely different from the UFO, topic, but it will be something that things that are important to our environment, our society. Like I am just thrilled, absolutely thrilled to be working on some of these things. And so we'll just keep our fingers crossed and see what happens. But it'll be great. So
Absolutely, absolutely, and I really enjoy it, and um, enjoy the opportunity to get involved in projects that are rewarding and intellectually stimulating, and that people find of interest. Um, there's always going to be a certain demographic of haters, a certain percentage of people that are either disingenuously aiming contempt at us, or maybe in some instances, sincerely, really deeply identify with one narrative or another that
right,
we seem to be depleting or calling into question. And, to those, I would just say, if we're not your thing, okay, maybe give us a chance. Maybe try to figure out um, where how you might could tell us that we're looking at something wrong. I have never found Erica to be unwilling to listen to alternative ideas, or for me to ask her, you sure about this? Maybe we could rethink that. Uh, but um, where we do just really not even have time for the exchange is with people that are just contemptuous and argue in logical fallacies, and um, under the guise of being open-minded,
right.
are unwilling to listen to any alternative ideas.
Right. And, I mean, I think we both know that there are people that are hiding behind, they're probably the same person in a lot of these anonymous online accounts. But at the end of the day, we both are very approachable, and either of us would, and we do have conversations with people that we don't agree with, because that's what we should be doing as adults and people that care to, move along in a protective way. So I think, yeah, I appreciate that. And,
Yeah.
it's been interesting. Twitter's definitely been an interesting ride, which,
Oh, it's painful to watch sometimes. It really is. Yeah.
it's definitely getting a little bit more sketchy, Wild West for sure. But that's okay. Someday you might not see me on Twitter. I know that's very sad news for people, but you can still see me here if I decide to pull the Twitter cord. But I know this is deep news. This is big news right here. Gosh, you heard
Yeah.
it first on
Yeah.
Expanding Frontiers Research.
Yes.
And thank you, Steve, for the nice donation and spooky. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I really appreciate the comments I'm seeing stream by in chat. I really appreciate all of you guys. And, I appreciate the eyes on the blogs, and on the YouTube videos and the comments you leave and all. We really are just advocating here for just reasonable points of view. If they take us into extraordinary circumstances or yet to be better understood phenomena, fine, but let's just know the difference between arguing to a preconceived agenda and actually being open to other possibilities. And if I mean, you really just said it all earlier, Erica, when you were saying that if a person is transparent and if they're sincere and if they have a reasonable line of evidence to present, they would happily interact with you and share that with you and want you to understand it and provide it to your viewers. Let's take aerial phenomena investigations, for instance, and Paul Carr and the small team that he's put together that just diligently go through UFO report after UFO report, and they have their flow chart of how they handle it, and they're not flashy, they're not flamboyant, they're just reliable and provide people with reasonable investigation, and that's what they enjoy doing. So
Right.
more power to them, more power to them. And again, we get into a thing, I feel like, with Paul Carr and his folks, that everybody's encouraged to believe or suppose or speculate about what they want, but let's agree what the facts are. Like if we can't agree on what a fact is, then we can't debate what it indicates. And if we can't agree on a chain of evidence or a ranking system of evidence, standards of evidence, then we can't agree on what's more likely, or if it seems more likely to you that creatures that came through a portal somewhere were flying an aircraft overhead, or that blurry photo may represent something else. If we really can't identify why that's unlikely, like if we've just been so steeped in everything from entertainment films to bad documentaries to just surfing UFO websites constantly, then it's going to be really hard to come to some meaningful and rational interactions.
Well, I think, too, we've got, like, for me, I mean, I can't stress this enough. People should quit tagging UFO Twitter on social media. It's like there is no point. There is absolutely no point. I mean, we need to, and I know that Peter just mentioned creating a group in Telegram. So we will have, we will consult the Oracle, see if we can do that, if we've got the time and things. But I mean, I definitely appreciate the great cohesive group of people that we have listening to the show and that have been, following my work and your work for many, many years. I think it's really awesome. So I want to say just really quickly, like, Scotty, thank you for your comments. Scott Nielsen from My Favorite Place on the Planet and the Earth and Spooky, and Jim Morris. It's always nice to see you. And the Earth, I look forward to talking to you. And Peter, I want to say that I'm sorry that I have not asked. I know that you had a couple questions, but I want to just ask this before we get done. Why did the Intruders Foundation collapse, and why didn't it continue with some associate? Jack, do you know the answer?
I do know the gist of the answer to it. The Intruders Foundation, it's my understanding, took a fatal blow because of the Jim. I hope I don't butcher this name. Mortiaro, something like that. Jim Mortiaro case that was promoted heavily by Bud and Mortallero. That was it. I knew I didn't have that right. Jim Mortallero. Uh, he was vying to be a famous abductee. And Bud did some hypnosis sessions with him. Uh, Carol Rainey was found the stories very dubious, and the calling card that Bud Hopkins and Leslie Kane and that crowd were promoting around the lecture circuit was that Jim had medical documentation of his injuries during abductions, and that these doctors were saying he was getting fiercely beating and they'd never seen anything like it, and then it's healed miraculously and all. And I don't remember exactly, but all these extraordinary circumstances that Jim claimed were in doctors' notes. And it came to a boiling point where the Intruders Foundation consisted of some credentialed, knowledgeable people that were supposed to theoretically act as somewhat of a peer review for Bud and, by extension, Leslie, and some of the extraordinary things they were claiming. And I don't think it'll surprise Erica and a lot of people that Bud was averting from this a lot. He didn't like having partnerships with people that would, like we were just talking about API. I could completely see Paul Carr saying, "Here's what I think, tell me why not." Where Bud's not going to be your guy that says, "Tell me why not." And where it really, the rubber hit the road when they just wouldn't deal anymore with Bud and Jim saying the documentation's coming. They said, "We got to have it or we're just cutting this loose, we're resigning, whatever." And so Jim produced some documents, and they were quickly identified as subpar. And the foundation even put out a statement to the effect that they were fraudulent. And so Bud finally let go. And I've joked about he let go of the case, but it had claw marks all over it when he did. He finally let go of it. And it pretty much cost him his board at the Intruders Foundation. And I would say, in a manner of speaking, it cost him his wife as well, and Carol Rainey, that he wouldn't listen to her with her background in medical research and grant writing and film production. And everybody was telling him, "Man, this doctors just don't do stuff like this. It's just no good." And Bud and Leslie Kane were all in on the Jim Mortallero case. And that was kind of like with NICAP, how the Condon report wasn't literally the end, but it's pretty much seen as the beginning of the end. The Jim Mortallero case and him being publicly seen as a fraud was pretty much the end of the Intruders Foundation, is my interpretation.
Thank you. Thanks for addressing that. And I know Peter thanks you. And I want to just mention actually Shadowy Spectrums. Peter has done a great show, and you need to find it on YouTube. And Peter is a great interviewer. He just did a new interview that dropped this week, and he's very interested in cases, down in Argentina and Brazil, and he has amazing music, amazing production values. And so I just want to give a shout out to Peter, who is very cool. So check out his
Shadowy
channel.
spectrums.
Yep, absolutely. And so anyway, it's time to end the show, even though I know we could, talk for hours. I will be in the next couple of weeks putting up the interview that I did with Jan when he was here on the last day. So I set up the video cameras. We were going through documents, and he found some amazing things. It was really, really cool to have him go through and say, yes, this is the person that I knew back then. And it was just a really cool process. So I will be putting those interviews up in the next little bit. So you can look for those. And then also thank you to my Patreon subscribers who actually help cover some of the costs for the show that we do. And then also want to thank the people that donate to Expanding Frontiers Research. We are doing this is like a labor of love. Right now we're putting a lot of time and a lot of money into not only setting up the nonprofit, but also paying for the website, paying for FOIAs, doing all the things, not even thinking about reimbursing ourselves for the time that we're taking away from family and business and things like that. But we believe in what we are doing. And so we definitely value public support. And so we thank you for pledging your support to Expanding Frontiers Research. And next week, I'm not sure what's going to happen. You know me, I kind of like to wait till the last minute and get something out there, but definitely wait for Jen Aldridge's interview to drop. And thank you guys for being here, and you guys take care. And thank you, Jack. And you can go to the UFO Trail and check out Jack's work and expandingfrontiersresearch.org. So
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, you guys. I'll talk to you guys soon. If I can actually play the outro, this will be Seventh Sign of the Apocalypse. Here we go. Good night.